Oh boy. Not sure if you've heard it yet. Well, you probably have, but I'm just going to reiterate it to you. It's Washington, D.C., man. It's Washington, D.C., lady. Don't you know it's the nation's capital? And well, it's been in the news a lot. The capital, Washington, D.C., where all the governmental work supposedly gets done. But as we can see, there's not too much work that gets done in Washington, D.C. I think that's a nonpartisan statement to make. And I'm not nonpartisan. I'm a moderate. But a lot of people think I'm a radical. But because I'm a moderate and I don't stand for lack of progress, well, that's radical in thinking. Therefore, I am a radical. But radicals get shit done. The rest of you don't get shit done. You just complain about shit. But you don't do shit. Well, anyway, Washington, D.C., the capital. Well, in January, it got stormed by white supremacists. And, well, just your regular buffoons. And, well, they had like the gates and the walls and all those, the hoopla to protect, well, our legislators, who understandably so were spooked by, well, a bunch of crazies coming into town and storming their building that they that they work in. So that's understandable. I mean, imagine you go to your job and you got thousands of people outside your employer and they storm in and they're like, we're really upset at the decisions your employer is making and we want to make our voices heard. Well, yeah, that's why you vote. That's why you email. That's why you can call. That's how you make your voice heard. You can also write letters. Postage stamps, well, you can buy those at the post office. The post office, last I heard, needs some funding. Anyway, let me get back to Washington, D.C. Because outside of the politicians that do nothing, they got other problems. Well, the story came out just recently that Muhammad Anwar, an immigrant from Pakistan, well, he was tragically murdered. And you're going to say, well, people get murdered all the time. What's the big news about this? Why are you bringing it up, Purple People Gal? And, well, I always have a reason why I do things. Even if you don't understand at this particular point in time, well, you will soon. And so, what makes this story interesting, or what makes it newsworthy actually, is the culprits, the responsible party, as I should call them. Because, well, there were two involved that we know of. And, well, they could have been working with a ring. And that part of the story hasn't been mentioned yet. So there's been a rash of carjackings where people, well, they break into your car and they steal your possessions. It happens everywhere, especially in the inner cities, the major metropolitan areas where people live. And well, D.C. and Maryland and Chicago, New York City, Seattle, Portland, Denver, Los Angeles, San Jose, San Francisco, all the liberal baskins, their cars are being broken into by hooligans. And these hooligans, well, it just so happened in D.C. that they were underage girls. Well, they identify that way for now. Anyway, it was a 13-year-old girl and a 15-year-old girl that assaulted this UberEats driver, Muhammad Anwar. May he rest in peace. He seemed like he was a hardworking person. He immigrated to America in 2014, wanting to build a better life. White people come to the country. You see, everybody thinks they can come and become rich. And it's not a lie. If you come over here and you work hard, you can actually make more than where you're from. Because, well, certain entities will they work to destabilize other countries to keep afloat our standard of living. But I won't go there because, well, I'm already heavily censored. And, well, certain things upset the establishment. Well, anyway, the gist of why I'm telling you this story is, well, they're minors. Two girls in Washington, D.C., carjacking. And it was daytime. It wasn't even nighttime. I was like, maybe it's 11 p.m. And it's one of those night excursions where you tell your best friend, let's go to Burger King. And your best friend asks you, how are we going to get to Burger King? Ooh, we can order an Uber. And your best friend is like, but I don't have any money for Burger King. And your best friend is like, well, we can carjack the Uber driver. And you go, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Come on, admit it. You saw Horace Bueller's Day Off. Remember, I'm an old owl. I've seen it all. A million times. Well, 1,000,001. But 1,000,000 times seems better. And, well, when you're young, you're sort of kind of rebellious. You sort of kind of take chances. And, well, I'm not much for authority. But I do have a question. Where were their guardians? Did their parents know where they were? They were by themselves. It's hard to believe that you tell your mom and dad as you leave the house, bye, Mom and Dad. I'm off to carjack. Carjack? Is that some new TikTok dance? Yeah, Mom. It's a new TikTok dance. We do the carjack. We do shuffle your feet and move your arms, and it's called the carjack. They probably will come out with a TikTok song called the carjack pretty soon. It'll be popular, and everybody will be doing the carjack. Maybe they won't do the physical carjacking, but they'll do the dance. Whatever works. Anyway, something's wrong with Washington, D.C., especially with girls. That's been a problem for a long period of time. It goes, well, unspoken about, like a lot of other things. Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. No taxation without representation. Well, Washington, D.C. has no representation. Well, it's close. Maybe they'll get statehood. It'd be a good thing. If you pay taxes, you ought to get representation. You ought to get a vote. Especially if you're going to war and you're, well, in the actual nation's capital. And you don't even have a vote to authorize the war. And you're a representative of the nation's capital. Kind of embarrassing that Washington, D.C. has never actually declared a real war. But I digress, because we don't want to rock the boat too much. Washington, D.C. has a real problem with their girls. Washington, D.C., you ought to find out, what's the problem with the girls? Do they have good guardians? Are their parents loving? Are they running with the wrong crowd? When you're young and you're bored and you're at home 24/7 and you're feeling healthy, vitality, you're feeling antsy, you want to get out there with your best friend, it's always a good idea to check in, see if they're not making any mischief, not being hooligans, not behaving, well, badly. Washington, D.C., this is what happens when you don't invest, when you don't see potential and you do nothing. Well, people get desperate, and desperate times call for desperate people. They were probably just going to carjack that car and go to the mall. They weren't going to do anything with the car. They weren't going to sell the car. And they were probably going to get caught eventually because they're 13 and 15. And the police would have pulled them over and found out that they're not the rightful owners of the car. And Muhammad Anwar would have got his car back, probably within 48 hours, maybe even less than that. Instead, well, the gentleman tried to fight the girls off. And, well, that's understandable. It's frustrating somebody's carjacking your property or your property that you're perceived to own. Well, I get that. But you gotta weigh the benefits, the pros and cons to it. Is it really worth it? Now, I'm an UberEats driver. Well, I'm a delivery driver. Does it really make sense to go after my car? It's not really mine anyway. I'm making payments on it. You know, if they crash it, I get a big payout. You know, you gotta be forward thinking. Rest in peace, Muhammad Anwar. You were what makes the country great. You were an immigrant. And we ought to stop bashing immigrants. Because, well, 99.9% of you are immigrants. And the 0.1% that aren't, well, you drove those people across the ocean, the Atlantic. They didn't want to be here. You captured them and enslaved them. So, this is actually indigenous land. You're currently occupying it. And when the indigenous, well, this is another video, but when the indigenous want their land back, you know the Purple People's Owl is going to advocate for that eventually. And, well, by advocating, I'm not the ordinary type of advocator. I do things a lot different than, well, a lot of individuals. So anyway, Washington, D.C., figure out what's happening with your underage girls. You know, do some investigations. Form a committee. You guys like committee work, where you get to shuffle papers, write reports, sign things, sponsor legislation, pass bills with your name on it, say that it's going to be effective, and it doesn't do jack shit. So do that. At least in the forming the committee during discovery, we can actually find out what some problems are. And so the real people who actually solve the problems, you know, social workers, mutual aid community workers, well, they can get to addressing it. You know, it could be that the kids are just bored. There's nothing for them to do. They're a little tired of TikTok. That was 2020. There needs to be something more creative. You know, you can only keep an attention span for like less than 4 seconds nowadays. It's called the algorithm. It's really sick. Anyway, let's find out what's happening in Washington, D.C. with our girls, especially the underage ones. Something smells rotten, and we got to get to the bottom of it.